Welcome to Imran Star Video, or as we call it, ISVi, the collaborative lens on Vancouver, unfiltered, unscripted, and powered by community. We're not just a voice behind the mic, we're a collective of creators, thinkers, storytellers, and city lovers coming together to spotlight the people, places, and energy that make Vancouver what it is. From coast mountain skylines to neon lit backstreets, we're covering everything from downtown buzz to the untold stories shaping our scene. You'll find us exclusively on YouTube, no algorithms, no filters, just real talk. We're behind the scenes, updates, and chaotic brilliance in real time. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram. So hit subscribe, drop a comment, and help us grow from 100 to 10,000 subscribers and beyond. Because this isn't just our platform, it's yours too. Turn it up, get into it. Let's talk Vancouver. This is ISVi. Stanley Park is many things: a selfie hotspot, a Sunday cycling route, a dating app first date destination, and, according to half of Vancouver, the only valid reason to own hiking boots you never actually hike in. But beneath the filtered forest photos and jogger thirst traps lies a much weirder, deeper, and slightly haunted history. Because, let's be honest, you don't get 1,000 acres of old growth forest, stolen land, and suspicious squirrel activity without collecting some ghost stories and moral complications along the way. Sure, on the surface, Stanley Park looks like a peaceful green escape from the chaos of downtown. Birds chirping, tourists smiling, someone's chihuahua wearing a sweater that costs more than your rent. But look a little closer, step off the manicured trails and into the mossy shadows, and the whole place starts to feel less like a park and more like a haunted ex that never got closure. This isn't just your average city park, it's land with a backstory. And that story includes colonization, forced eviction, naval ghosts, and an actual place called Dead Man's Island. Yes, that's a real thing, and no, you should not picnic there unless you want spiritual side effects. It's where joggers unknowingly cruise past sacred indigenous sites, kids feed ducks on top of unmarked burial grounds, and tourists take selfies with totem poles without having the slightest idea what they mean. It's Vancouver's most beautiful secret keeper. So in this exploration of Stanley Park secrets, we're not here for just the vibes. We're here for the tea, the buried history, the unspoken hauntings, the forgotten trails, and the many, many ways this beloved green space is far more complicated than your yoga's teacher's Instagram post suggests. We'll dive into the real indigenous roots of the land, long before anyone named Stanley showed up and slapped his name on it. Seriously, the man never even visited. Peel back the layers of ghost stories that haunt its trails. Expose some messy colonial erasure, and maybe even tell you where the raccoons run an underground government. That last part is unconfirmed, but spiritually true. So tighten your hiking boots or aesthetic bluntstones, change your phone flashlight, and get ready, because Stanley Park isn't just a walk in the park, it's a forest full of secrets, spirits, and vibes that scream, we've seen some Long before joggers and Lululemon pants started fake smiling their way around the seawall, the land we now call Stanley Park was and still is unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. This wasn't a forest waiting to be discovered. It was a homeland, a gathering space, and a living ecosystem deeply intertwined with indigenous culture, knowledge, and spirit. Spoiler, it still is, but try telling that to colonial developers who treated the land like an empty Pinterest board in the 1800s. Contrary to the National Geographic version of history, the one with sepia tones and passive voice, Stanley Park wasn't just established one day. The area was already home to vibrant indigenous communities, including Hoi Hoi, aka, and Shethus settlements that had been there for generations, minding their business, thriving off the land and not asking for zoning permits or Instagrammable signage. But then, surprise, colonizers rolled up like they were uninvited to a party and still expected to DJ. Suddenly, land that had been respectfully stewarded for thousands of years was rebranded as the future site of leisure and colonizer picnic baskets. The residents of Hoi Hoi were forcibly removed in the late 1800s, their homes torn down, their way of life disrupted, and their existence whitewashed into footnotes. The excuse? To make way for a park, because nothing says progress like evicting people to plant decorative shrubs and build a seawall. And let's talk about that name. Stanley Park, named after Lord Stanley, a British dude who literally never set foot on the land, but still got a statue and a hockey cup. Meanwhile, the people who actually lived there got booted out and erased from the brochure. Imagine someone naming your house after their uncle and then charging tourists admission to walk through it. What the city calls a park, indigenous communities call ancestral territory. These lands weren't just real estate, they were sacred, alive and integral to cultural practices, seasonal gatherings, spiritual rituals, and day-to-day life. Trees were medicines, trails were trade routes, waterways were relatives. So when colonial powers seized the land and turned it into the backdrop for white leisure, they didn't just take space, they took identity, sovereignty, and generations of belonging. And guess what? They never gave it back. To this day, Stanley Park remains unceded territory, meaning it was never sold, surrendered, or signed away, which makes every Welcome to Stanley Park sign hit just a little different. Kind of like walking into someone's house, stealing the couch, and then putting up a plaque that says, "You're welcome to enjoy this public seating area." So yes, before the bike lanes, before the beaver tails, and way before the overpriced horse-drawn carriage tours, this was indigenous land, and it still is. And if we're going to walk these trails, picnic on this grass, or post selfies at Brockton Point, the very least we can do is remember who was here first and who was pushed out to make room for green space. Because this land wasn't empty, it was emptied. Stanley Park may look like your average peaceful nature escape, trees swaying, joggers wheezing, someone's dog doing zoomies near the seawall, but don't let the crunchy granola vibes fool you. This place is haunted, and not like awkward encounter with your ex at the Prospect Point Cafe haunted. We're talking actual spirits, restless energies, and enough eerie stories to make even the raccoons nervous. Let's start with the big one, Dead Man's Island. Yes, the name is real. No, the city still hasn't changed it. And honestly, why would you name an island Dead Man's and then build a naval base on it unless you wanted ghost problems? This tiny, heavily restricted chunk of land in Stanley Park has been everything from a sacred Spanish burial site to the location of smallpox quarantine camps, to a settler-era graveyard, to, yes, a literal military installation. That's a spiritual do not disturb sign if there ever was one, and yet here we are, training cadets on top of ancient remains like it's not the origin story of every horror movie ever. Multiple people, locals, visitors, and people with actual jobs in the Navy have reported seeing a woman in white standing on the shore at night, crying and vanishing. Classic ghost behavior, also terrifying. If your evening jog suddenly gets cold and eerie around the rowing club, that's not your body trying to hydrate, that's a warning from the other side. But Dead Man's Island is just the headline. The rest of the park, also haunted. There are stories of a spectral man in 1930s workwear wandering near Hollow Tree, said to be a logger who died in an accident and still hasn't clocked out. There are whispers in the trees near Chathus and Hoi Hoi, former indigenous village sites, where visitors report hearing chanting or footsteps on trails where no one walks. Let's not forget the inexplicable cold spots during certain sections of the seawall that even your Patagonia jacket can't explain. Prospect Point, more like Prospect Poltergeist. Tourists have claimed to see strange shapes moving just beyond the tree line. One couple swears they saw a child peeking out from behind a tree, but when they approached, the figure vanished and the air dropped 10 degrees. Also, no child has ever willingly stood still that long in nature, so you know something's up. And don't even get us started on Beaver Lake, that weirdly still, half-sinking swamp in the middle of the forest that gives serious cursed cottagecore energy. Locals say it has a vibe, which is Vancouver's code for bad energy or too polite to directly name. People have reported seeing fog roll in unnaturally fast, strange lights hovering over the water, and feeling like they're being watched. All classic signs of either a haunting or a very passive-aggressive forest spirit. What's wild is how all of this spooky chaos is wrapped in tourism brochures that say things like tranquil, scenic, family-friendly. Meanwhile, an indigenous ancestor might be side-eyeing you from a tree because you just took a selfie on a sacred site with the caption, Forest Fairy Vibes. So yes, Stanley Park is haunted, and for good reason. You don't displace communities, pave over burial sites, and build military buildings on sacred ground without consequences. Some ghosts are angry, they're just tired of being ignored. And some are probably mad that people keep feeding them historically inaccurate versions of what happened here. If you're going to enjoy the views, that's fine. Just know that you're sharing the trail with more than just joggers and raccoons, and maybe next time, after a little respect, a moment of silence, or at least don't litter. Spirits are watching, and they have better memory than the city archive. Stanley Park may look like your average peaceful nature escape, trees swaying, joggers wheezing. If Stanley Park is Vancouver's crown jewel, then this section is the part of the crown that's slightly crooked, possibly cursed, and 100% not on the tourist brochure. While the average visitor sticks to the seawall like it's the only path allowed, no shame, it's iconic, those who dare to wander deeper into the woods find something much weirder. A tangle of unmarked trails, crumbling wartime leftovers, and vibes so strange even raccoons won't mess with them. Let's start with Beaver Lake, aka the city's slowest disappearing act. Once a sparkling lake with canoes and clear reflections, it's now a mysterious swampy pit of slowly encroaching vegetation and unanswered questions. There are trails around it, sure, but walk them at dusk and tell us it doesn't feel like the prequel to a horror movie where someone named Kyle says it's probably nothing right before getting taken by a moss-covered ghost. Then there's the network of unofficial, semi-legal, maybe haunted trails that crisscross the forest like Mother Nature's maze. Some are remnants of logging routes, others were likely forged by cryptids, the sense of direction. If you stray off the main paths, you might stumble across half-buried stone steps, old fire pits, tree carvings that scream lost love or summoning ritual, and mysterious wooden structures that look like either an art project or the Blair Witch's summer rental. And yes, we said bunkers. During World War II, Stanley Park played host to a series of military fortifications that were meant to protect Vancouver's harbor from enemy ships. Today, some of those concrete relics are still hidden in the underbrush, crumbling, moss-covered, and screaming, "I was once important." You might find them near Ferguson Point, camouflaged by time and city negligence. They're basically Vancouver's version of Cold War conspiracy content, only with more squirrels. Wander far enough and you might also come across strange stone circles, stacked driftwood forts, and spots where the forest suddenly feels off. Like your phone signal disappears, the trees go quiet, and your inner voice says, hey, maybe don't stand there. Listen to that voice, it's probably channeling every ancestor you've got. But not all the park's secrets are creepy, some are just deeply chaotic, like the unofficial bike jumps in the middle of nowhere, clearly constructed by someone with both ADHD and a death wish, or the random benches facing absolutely nothing, as if designed by a nihilist who just wanted you to sit and think about the void. Oh, and then there's Lover's Walk, an old, nearly forgotten path that once served as the low-key hookup trail for couples and couples to be, long before dating apps existed. It's now mostly overgrown, quiet, and slightly judgmental if you're walking alone while a pair of crows stare at you like they know your deepest secrets, which they probably do. The thing about Stanley Park's hidden corners is that they feel wild in a way the curated spaces don't. Here, the city's control slips, nature reclaims, and the whispers of everything that came before, from indigenous stewards to settler weirdos to military dads, lurk beneath the ferns. It's less like a park and more like a choose-your-own-adventure novel where every option leads to a new plot twist, or a raccoon attack. So yeah, the next time you find yourself on the same old seawall loop, maybe take a detour. Just bring a friend, a flashlight, and a firm understanding that if you disappear into the trees, the park will absolutely keep your secrets. Let's be real, Stanley Park is Vancouver's most iconic flex. It's the main character of every tourist Instagram grid and the go-to look how green and progressive we are talking point in every city branding pitch. But behind the tree-filtered selfies, rented bikes, and awkward engagement photo shoots is a carefully manicured narrative that conveniently leaves out a ton of uncomfortable truth. Because here's the thing, Stanley Park isn't just a pretty forest, it's a living museum of colonial erasure wearing a hiking vest, and the city's tendency to promote nature without talking about whose nature it was first is giving major influencer who never credits the photographer energy. Start with the signs, literally. For every totem pole display with a cute little blurb, there's a mountain of indigenous displacement and cultural theft that's been cropped out like a toxic ex in a group photo. The city loves putting up interpretive plaques that say things like ancient village site or historically significant area, but somehow always forget to mention that those villages were forcibly removed so settlers could plant roses and hold Victorian picnics without having to interact with actual indigenous people. The totem poles at Rockton Point, beautiful, yes, but they're not even from the local nations as the land the park sits on. Most were brought in from other regions as aesthetic set pieces, a kind of cultural staging to satisfy tourists without ever engaging with real history. It's giving borrowed culture, no context, all vibes. And the park's colonial past, that gets a Disney filtered news. The marketing materials talk about Stanley Park being preserved wilderness and a gift to the people, when in reality it was a land grab wrapped in a PR stunt, handed to the city by the federal government after removing the communities already living there. It's like calling your roommate's stuff a gift after you kicked them out and sold their TV. Even the seawall, arguably Vancouver's most beloved loop of cardio and crisis, has a history that rarely makes it onto the souvenir fridge magnets. Built over decades with prison labor, First Nations land, and more political back and forth than a toxic situationship, it's presented now like it was always meant to be there. Spoiler, it wasn't. Tourism wants you to see Stanley Park as serene, untouched, and neutral, like it sprang from the earth, fully formed, holding a Starbucks cup. But the reality is messier. There's trauma in the roots, history in the dirt, and resistance in the silence. And pretending it's just a great place to spot raccoons and cry after a Tinder date doesn't do justice to everything that's been erased, renamed, and monetized. Meanwhile, Indigenous stewards, activists, and community leaders are still out here trying to reinsert truth into a landscape that's been branded over. They're running walking tours, cultural education sessions, art installations, and land back initiatives, often on a shoestring budget, while the city keeps approving permits for yet another overpriced bike rental kiosk. So, what do we choose to forget? A lot. And that forgetting isn't passive, it's curated. It's baked into brochures, trail maps, and awkward civic ceremonies where no one can pronounce the name of the nation they're honoring. It's not just erasure, it's narrative landscaping, and it's working. Until we start telling the full story of Stanley Park, Indigenous presence, colonial violence, spiritual significance, and all, we're not celebrating the land. We're staging it, like a backyard wedding where no one invites the neighbors they displaced. So here's the deal. Stanley Park isn't just Vancouver's pretty face, it's the city's messy ex, spiritual archive, and colonially confused stepchild all rolled into one. You can walk the seawall, take in the sunset, and eat your $6 organic banana bread, but if you're not clocking the buried histories beneath your bluntstones, then babe, you're just ghosting the truth with good cardio. Because Stanley Park is beautiful, yes, but it's also complicated AF. It's a park built on eviction, a forest shaped by resistance, a tourist attraction haunted by colonial convenience, and the occasional literal ghost. It's not just a peaceful escape from the city, it's a masterclass in how Canada buries uncomfortable history under trees, bike paths, and polite small talk. And listen, we're not saying don't enjoy the park. Go off, Queen. Picnic, paddleboard, cry under a tree, but do it while knowing this land was never empty. It was taken, it was renamed, and it was redesigned to look wild. After it had already been lived in, loved, protected, and eventually repackaged as a tourist fantasy. You owe it to the people who were removed, whose villages were bulldozed, and whose spirits still vibe check you from the tree line, to walk these trails with your eyes open and your phone off silent. Because appreciating nature is cute, but acknowledging who cared for it first, was forcibly removed for it, and who still fights to be seen in it today, that's actual respect. So next time you're out there admiring the mossy trees and taking deep breaths to recover from a bad hinge date, remember, you're standing on unceded land. You're surrounded by stories that haven't been told in park brochures. And there's a chance that raccoon watching you from the bush is an ancestor, reincarnated, just waiting to see if you're going to say the land acknowledgement out loud or just repost it to your IG story. Stanley Park is still alive, still grieving, still resisting. Walk the trails, but know the story. And maybe, just maybe, don't trust the fog. And just like that, the city's pulse slows, but the story doesn't stop. You've been watching ISVi, Imran Star video, where voices come together and the city speaks back. We're a crew, not a single face, a movement, not a moment. And every episode that's built with you, for you, by all of us. From the seawall to the skyline, from underground voices to rooftop vibes. We're telling the stories that don't make the news, but make the neighborhood. If this episode hit, pass it on. Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on TikTok and Instagram. Drop a comment, leave a like, and tell us what your Vancouver sounds like. We're building this together, clip by clip, story by story, from 100 to 10,000 subscribers, to wherever this takes us. When we get there, we all show up. So until the next drop, stay loud, stay collective, and stay in it. This is ISVi, signing off.